So today we're gonna go through my watercolor sketchbook that I just finished this month and started back in January 2019. So this first page and further into this sketchbook, I would do paint-alongs with the artist Sarah Burns' studio. I'll put her name up here on the screen and a link to her page in the description. She has on her Patreon, for $5 you can get all of her paint-alongs. She does watercolor, gouache, and just teaches you how to do different landscapes. And I definitely learned a lot about basically the layering techniques of watercolor, and just it broadened my knowledge of watercolor. So she's really great at teaching you that. So this was her forest scene one. This page was a swatch page. This was actually one I did later on and just used the back because I got a box full of watercolor stuff that my dad had hoarded away and just never got around to learning and using. So that's some of this swatching over here. And then this was my first attempt at just messing around with landscape on my own. This wasn't from a reference or anything. I was just playing with colors and just what I could do from my imagination. And then this is the same thing, except I did more of a autumn color scheme, toned down browns and warm colors. In this page, I was messing around with the water-soluble graphite pencils. So you can see up here I did some swatching with them before I worked on my cat. And then here's where I started getting the box of watercolors that I talked about. And I started messing around with them, doing little landscape paintings. And this was from a step-by-step watercolor book that was in that box. So I did it's old shack landscape. Here's more messing around with the new watercolors, and there were watercolor pencils in there as well. And this is where I did a full page spread because I thought that would be fun. So I did this pretty much from my imagination and just trying to get a foreground and a background and having that depth there. And here was another imagination one where I wanted to use purples and stuff in the sky. It's supposed to be a castle with rocks and stuff, but more shadowed so you can't really see the detail. And yeah, I also used a lot of layer of color here. You can kind of see it's purples and blacks and blue. This one was partially from a reference, I think, and this was more messing around with the watercolor pencils. That's how I got the straight defined lines and stuff. Trying to do a cathedral type look. And this one I think was another one just from imagination, trying to put in some trees and just mess around with how I do leaves and stuff and the grasses. And here we're gonna have a long string. They go this direction, but there's a long string of the paint-alongs that I did. These were the clouds. As you can see, we're in April 2020 now, so we're gonna have a lot of paint-along ones. So these were the clouds, and I tried to write down the different techniques, especially if I liked the way they turned out. And it was like different times of the day clouds. Kind of like this one, not as a cloud, but like it looks like an oil spill. Like I like how that turned out, even though it wasn't supposed to be an oil spill. And then some of them I got the technique written down, but others I forgot. This one is one of my favorites too. Just messing around with some clouds. And then this one was one of her more recent paint-alongs that I actually did when she did it live. And I had a mishap happen in this corner because I used the liquid frisket there to try and get the petals not to get covered and stuff, but when I went to like erase it off, it like peeled the paper. So this sketchbook paper probably isn't the best quality to be using the frisket on. So yeah, I tried to fix that, fix my mistake, but this, like, when you rub your finger on this, it's like rough, ripped paper over there. But this, my flower over here, turned out good. It still had some mishaps with the frisket, but not as much as this side. This one was one of her older paint-alongs that I did from her Patreon list. I definitely love the colors in this one. I'm a big fan of purples and blues. And a little, I think, bonsai tree. She has a paint-along trees tutorial as well, but I only did this one out of it. This one, I moved on to doing my own thing, and she actually has reference photos that you can use on her Patreon as well, so I used some of those for these. And I did these succulents. This one was another reference photo with some rocks and over the ocean. Just kind of messing around with like the waves, and I used gel pen, the white gel pen down here. Then some mushrooms, messing around with mixing colors with those, and then some mushrooms that went up a tree, also from her reference photos. And this one, I just wanted to paint some seashells, so I Google image searched these and just played around with color too. I didn't really match the colors that much. And then I wanted to make this a super like loose painting, but yeah, I had some fun just doing some loose painting, loose lines, and another one from her references, but I changed this tree to be a palm tree instead of whatever tree was in the picture, but I definitely used it for the gazebo. I almost feel like my textures here almost like children's book illustration, so I thought that was kind of fun. And that's the last one. But yeah, that was my watercolor sketchbook. It was well loved, and I definitely like sped through the last few within the last month or so when we've been in this stay-at-home phase. I don't have another watercolor sketchbook, but I have watercolor paper, so maybe I'll either make my own or just cut out my own pieces that I can practice on and then show those. But I have my main drawing sketchbook that I've kind of been neglecting, that's maybe halfway through, that I started at the beginning of this year, I think. Not sure. So hope you enjoyed that peek at my watercolor sketchbook and me just learning. That's basically what this whole book was. If you want to check out some of my actual art pieces with watercolor, I have a few time lapses of those up. But I hope you have a good rest of your day, and thank you for watching.